Oh yeah, be done. Oh yeah, be done.
If we could resume our council meeting, it being 9 a.m. Just a reminder that we are live streaming on the ORC YouTube channel. Councillor Laws has apologised for lateness. We're anticipating that's for the first hour and a half or so. Would somebody like to move that we accept his apology? Moved.
And Robbie
Andrew.
Apology for the whole meeting.
Oh, sorry, I apologize, Jessie.
Seconded Kate.
Yep.
All those in favour?
Aye.
On the contrary, carried. We may also, depending on timing, lose Matt for a while later. So we'll just see how we go. Moving on to 9.11. Final ORC Indigenous Biodiversity Strategy 2026 for adoption. Who's introducing this, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am introducing this paper. So this is to present the council with its final version of the Indigenous Biodiversity Strategy for consideration and adoption. The history is pretty well detailed in the executive summary, but we first put this out in June 25. The strategy now that's been developed will guide us to deliver on our statutory functions and national direction with regard to the maintenance of Otago's Indigenous biodiversity. And we're required by the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity to have this strategy, but bearing in mind the strategy itself is not a regulatory document. It's been designed to get the most from available resources. We had a lot of input from the various stakeholders in the community, and we'll get the most from the available resources and our existing strengths. And any funding implications will be sought through the 27-37 long-term plan. So with that, I'll pass over to the team to carry on, and we'll move from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Rana Koto. I'm Shay from the strategy team here with Hilary and Amanda. It's great to be at the end of 2 years of developing the strategy, and we're in a strong position with good support across a wide range of sectors from federated farmers to forest and bird. The strategy, as Councillor Gillespie outlined, is about the framework for us to deliver on our statutory function, the maintenance of Indigenous biodiversity in Otago. It's non-regulatory, but it is required by the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. In the development of the strategy, we partnered with Mana Whenua, collaborated with the Department of Conservation and the City and District Councils, and we spoke to more than 50 groups, businesses, individuals, those high impact, high influence people. And we had 10 council touch points throughout. This is the third this triennium. We've worked to align with the national and biodiversity strategy. And throughout the journey, we heard a clear and consistent view across all the stakeholders and the public of the role that ORC can play. And that's led to the strategy for you now, which is all about Mana Whenua as kaitiaki and communities as stewards and ORC and support. We've ended up with 3 pillars to focus our work. Focusing action, where it will make the biggest difference across everyone in Otago. Empowering action, making it easy to get the know-how and support to make a difference on the farm or in the backyard. And getting the system right, rallying everyone around a shared plan and attracting investment. Public feedback showed us some strong support. 93% supported the ambition and the strategy, and all wanted more ambition. And they rated all 3 of those pillars I just outlined highly effective. And 26 of the 27 letters we received through that process were supportive as well, across that range of stakeholders from primary sector, like federated farmers, beef and lamb, through to conservation groups like forest and bird. There was support and optimism. So we're recommending adoption with this paper today. Sure.
Thank you. Questions from councillors? What a good job you've done. There are no questions. Gary?
Sorry. So we say it's non-regulatory, but could it lead to changed or differing classifications of land into the future as we might look to redesignate how land is seen, is viewed within our plans that could have an implication for landowners?
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. So any of that kind of thing would be guided by national direction, which the government would set and would happen in those regulatory plans. This is the focus of this is empowering people to do voluntary measures. So no.
But landowners do get the opportunity. It's voluntary, so it's going to be a two-way thing where landowners could say no if there was an approach, and if it didn't suit the landowner, they would have the opportunity to take a stance.
Absolutely, and we're looking to work with people who want to work with us, on this. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I'll move the recommendations of the paper.
Second.
Kevin's got some questions. Sorry.
Kevin, have you got a question before we do that?
Just on, and this is probably a general one on all this sort of stuff that we do. We say on paragraph 14, where we look for responses and we did a survey, and it might be more an Amanda one than anyone else, that we received for this process, we received 217 responses out of a population of quite a few. So are we getting enough responses? That's paragraph 14, page, hopefully 323. And I just wonder if are we getting that engagement right? I've read all the responses you put in front of us and they're exceptional, but are we actually getting enough when we're doing that type of activity?
So there was 207 responses, and I think that's pretty good for this kind of strategy.
Yeah.
I think across the region, KLDC's climate and biodiversity strategy got a little bit less than that. So it's always just a flavour of what people are thinking and self-selecting. So that's something to note, but probably the big piece is the strong engagement from the ones with the high impact and high influence, those groups, individuals, businesses who have a lot to do with biodiversity in the region, and they were very generous with their feedback and time.
And so I suppose the litmus test is, are we getting any adverse reaction from people who felt they haven't been listened to? And have we had any of that?
No.
We haven't, so that's good.
I mean, my experience, Kevin, is that it can be hard to get engagement with strategies, and Shay's right, we should thank those, particularly those advocacy and groups that represent large numbers of people who did engage with us and do so on behalf of members. My experience, you will always get a load of people if you consult on parking or something that impacts people straight away, public transport. When you're talking strategically at a high level, it can be hard because we know time is precious for people, and when it may not have an immediate impact, in terms of where people choose to spend their time, it might not reach the top of the list. But we were fortunate through this process and through the work of the staff to get really good engagement from a lot of those key groups who do represent large parts of our population, and broadly urban through to rural populations.
In a subsequent question on under financial considerations 30, that any additional funding required will be sought through the long-term plan process, which is really good. Is there anything I should be scared of that is generally in this process not going to be looked after as business as usual? So you put the strategy in place and the general stuff that we're doing now, can you see anything that's going to fly out at me that's going to require a huge change in funding that may impact that long-term plan dramatically?
Can take that. Yeah. So the strategy has been designed to make the most of what we've got and build on the strengths we have. So you'll see us doing those things in a focused way and trying to direct all of the energies where it will have the biggest impact. That's probably the main piece there. And we'll be looking to put that into the LTP recommendations so you can weigh those on the merits.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
I think Neil was going to move and Kate was going to second. Moving into debate. Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to say three things, actually. Really impressed with it. It's already been touched on. Oh, sorry. I want to say three things. Hopefully you can hear me now. Really just want to emphasise, it's already been touched on with regards to paragraph 17 about how solid the feedback was from a cross section of our region. I think that sets us up in a very sound way to take this document forward by adopting it today. The second thing I think is around, we're not only talking about biodiversity here, but we're actually also talking about biosecurity, because to achieve good biodiversity outcomes, we need to be ensuring that we're required the biosecurity aspect is sitting alongside to ensure that biodiversity is healthy and able to be sustained, protected and improved where necessary. And the last thing, and I think it's probably the most important thing, is if I scroll down to the Indigenous biodiversity strategy on a page, and I look at the section where what we'll do across our biodiversity and biosecurity work. And essentially, if you look at those three boxes, it's all about working in with others and empowering others. It talks about partnerships, it talks about working with communities, it's talking about promoting and monitoring, connecting, sharing knowledge, collaboration, co-design solutions. It goes on and on and on. So I think in terms of this document having an influence, the greatest thing it will do will help to empower the people that have responsibility in this space. Obviously, we've got responsibility in this space, but it also talks to all those other people that all need to play their part to ensure we get a good outcome with biodiversity across the region.
Sure. Yep.
I just wanted to recognise the huge amount that has gone into getting this far, and it's just reflects the importance, I suppose, of the role that the regional council plays here. Sometimes it's important to just stand up and say, you know, we do a really important role on behalf of our region. And it's important that it continues into the future because no one else is doing this role, and it's a role that involves bringing together a whole lot of other people. It doesn't mean that we do everything, but we have that really important role of facilitating and bringing action that's wanted, I suppose, by our communities. That builds on voluntary action and brings together a whole range of diversity of stakeholders and agencies. And while there's probably less investment in the conservation side of things these days, we pick it up in ways that are really effective. And this strategy is important. However, we've still got quite a lot of issues happening for biodiversity. Otago has 39 ecological districts, so distinct sort of zones of biodiversity, and 17 of them only occur in Otago. So that's pretty special. We've got something that's really unique here, and sometimes we get a bit doom and gloom about the state that we're in as well, but actually we have got something that's incredible happening here because of the diversity of topography, coastal, inland. We've got everything in Otago. We're really lucky, and the role that Regional Council has played here in putting this together, involving a whole range of people and in a positive way, in a way that people want to engage, will achieve something here and already is achieving great things. So yeah, just want to be really positive about that and highlight the role that we do play. So thank you very much to staff particularly that have been involved in that. It's been a lot of work, but I hope you feel a lot of satisfaction in where we've got to. Thank you.
Matt.
To be fair, Gretchen took most of the words I was going to say, but she's spoken them much better than I will. But yeah, thank you for the contribution that the community have made and the staff have been bringing this together, because someone's got to coordinate the themes and the ideas and give people hope and something to work towards. So I think that it's a fantastic document for achieving that. And I think the catchment management plans and the working in an integrated way across rural economies and conservation groups and that sort of stuff really does provide an opportunity that the stuff can start coming to life in a really positive way. So thank you.
Gary.
Thank you. Yes, acknowledging too the extent of work that's been done and the input from the community. But when I read the Indigenous Biodiversity Strategy on a page, I would just caution that if I handed that to any member of the community that I'm involved with, then it really looks like it's a Kaitahu document, and it looks like Ngāti Whenua have been leading this at every step of the way, and the outcomes are being driven in that direction. So I'll just urge some caution around what we do into the future, that this needs to be in all of Otago direction, and not just serving one faction of our community.
Right of reply, Andrew? Sorry, we lost Neil.
Well, yeah, Andrew basically gave it in the first place, so I haven't got too much to say, but I do want to just leave a lasting thought in response to what Councillor Keller says. Given that it's a strategy on Indigenous biodiversity, it's hardly surprising that there's a lot of reflection on things that have a cultural background. And I would be concerned if anybody thought that was what it was all about. The most important thing to me about this, and having coming in and at the end of the process, is that this level of support. And while Councillor Malcolm said only 207 responses, the people that are represented by those that we got responses from, or the number is significant. I guess to me, the key thing will be is to make sure this is not something that's stuck on a bookshelf and never looked at again. And I think, given the support that it's had, those organisations and others will learn a lot from this going forward. And I think we'll see it come back and be referred to in much of the work going forward, not just by us, but by other parties as well. So I commend the adoption of the biodiversity strategy. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to 9.12, compliance targets 226 to 227.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll introduce this paper. So this is the compliance targets, which is a requirement that the annual plan has, that each year we set the targets for the level of RMA compliance monitoring the council undertakes. This paper brings those targets to council for approval. The recommended targets represent a continuation of existing work programs and reflects approved annual plan budgets. In total, they mean that around 15% of consents will be audited next year, and around 45% will receive some sort of monitoring. The targets push towards focusing on higher risk consents, which are generally more complicated and take longer to audit. Simon and Alex are here and they manage the two teams affected by the targets and are here to answer any questions. So we've got Alex King and Simon Wilson who are in charge of consents and monitoring and compliance and enforcement. So I'll hand it over to you guys and maybe questions. And obviously we've got the GM Joe here as well.
Just happy to take the paper as read.
Thank you.
Richard,
Just checking, I might have missed it, but the priorities are a hierarchy or are just a list? Yeah, thanks.
Sorry,
So-
Madam Chair, can I just add one other thing? Sorry, I forgot to
certainly.
mention, if you go to the attachment, the first attachment, which is the compliance audit and performance monitoring schedule 26-27. You've got that in front of you. Down the left-hand side of that, where it's got priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're in the process of reviewing our compliance plan, and there is a paper that will come back to council in August where it's likely that those priorities listed there will be tweaked. So that's just for noting at this point, but until that paper comes to council, there are priorities at this point. But for the new updated compliance plan 26-29, there will be some tweaks when it comes to council and it will be adopted or as the new policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And in terms of the hierarchy question, I mean, the priorities are a hierarchy. They set out what's most important for us to focus on, but we do endeavour through the targets to focus on a range of activities. And so the targets push us towards doing much more work towards the top end high priority things, but they don't exclude doing work on other items. And there are other factors that come into the team deciding what work to do. It can be public interest, it can be compliance history, it can be environmental risk. So the priorities are just one of the things we factor into those.
Sorry, the question was whether A to F are in any order or they're all equally as important. Paragraph 9.
Oh, yes, they are in order. So the priority 1 is higher risk activity, more high risk than priority 6.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Kevin, then Neil.
Look, thanks for the report. Listen, what I really want to know is, are we monitoring and assessing enough activities to ensure that we're actually providing adequate environmental protection?
It's a great question, Councillor. We monitor the level we have and the targets we set push us towards monitoring the high risk activities. If you ask me, could we do more monitoring? The answer is yes, we could, but I'm comfortable with the level that's in there in terms of it gets us focusing on the most high risk activities.
So subsequent to that, have we seen, because of that stance that you take, have we seen any environmental issues occurring that would worry you from activities we're not quite doing and we're doing less on?
So the team sees environmental issues happening all the time, and I guess where the targets push us to is on focusing on those issues. So no, I think we focus on the important stuff is what these targets drive us to do.
And further to that again, so we are doing our monitoring, and we have on page, what page? 471, our range of this. When I push this, my big flash question open on our compliance tools on page 471. Are we actually progressing through those compliance tools at the right pace, and what determines that pace? So when we get something wrong, do you think that we're going through those steps quick enough, and what determines the pace that we go through those steps?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the pace we proceed through those steps. I think the team has some very good processes in place to drive the decision making there. Obviously, the vast amount of non-compliance we find is dealt with through audit reports and education and conversations with people and trying to change that behaviour. What drives our process through those steps is things like compliance history. It's the impact that something's had on the environment. And everything is a case by case basis, and the team makes a decision at the time. But I'm comfortable we use the appropriate tool at the appropriate time.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
Neil, then Kate.
Thanks. I'm assuming that compliance and monitoring are one and the same effectively. And I'm just wondering about the connection with the consent holders with when their consents are being monitored to ensure compliance, and how that is. I'm assuming there's a strategy for how that's done, and I'd be interested to know what sort of response we generally get from consent holders.
Yep. So compliance and monitoring is the same. I guess if we look at the multi parts of that question, the wider team, there's a proactive compliance monitoring part, which is dealing with consent holders, and then we have a reactive pollution, which is dealing with complaints as they come in. So the compliance team is slightly wider than just the monitoring function. In terms of the engagement with consent holders, we would, for the vast majority of audits, be meeting the consent holder on site and going through that process with them, getting them to talk us through the site and having a discussion with them when we were there. And then my environmental officers will be engaging directly with the consent holder on the outcome of their audit. And sorry, the third part of the question was?
The reaction from the consent holder.
Yeah, so look, in the vast majority of cases, our consent holders are very good. They're very keen to achieve compliance and they'll work towards achieving that. There's obviously always outliers to that, which is when some of the other tools come in. But yeah, the vast majority of consent holders are very good. Thank you.
Kate.
Thank you. Following on from that as an example, and so where we've got relatively low risk with brand new septic tanks services, but a requirement in the consent to supply information and everything about it. How do we go about monitoring those? Is that still done annually, or is it?
So broadly, and I might hand over to Alex in a second, there's two parts to monitoring. There is what we call performance monitoring, which is a consent has required something to be sent in, and Alex's team manage the flow of that information. And we have an approach there that says if the consent requires, firstly, if the consent requires it, then it needs to be sent in. And if it's been sent in as part of performance monitoring, then we should assess it, because the world where the council is receiving information and then not looking at it is not a space that we want to be. Then there's the prioritisation around audits, which is the 15% of consents we get to. And that's where you'd look at the priorities, and septic tanks are further down the priority list, and then you'd look at it being a brand new consent with assuming no poor compliance history, and that would again push it down the list for a physical audit. Anything you want to add there, Alex?
So those things won't be done. So 15% of the chance every 6 years, rather than
So it is on average every 6 years, but then within that, there are many priority 1 and priority 2 consents that will be at every year or every 2 years. And so once you get down the list, you might be talking once every 10 years. There may be some that just aren't on the list for an audit.
Okay. Given your risk priority, I know just teasing this because we get complaints from the community all the time. The biggest news stories have been the city and urban wastewater and substantial risks. Are the numbers that you've got there, as you suggested, they seem relatively, well, considering the number of them, relatively low. So if I look at best 50 inspections, no, that's wrong. 40, and the district council consents power generation and other large-scale activities in any 1 month. How many times would you visit large-scale sewage systems of one council in a year?
So we target a full audit of each wastewater treatment system, TA wastewater treatment system every year. Under that, there'll be, and different consents have different reporting frequencies, but there'll be some data requirements that the team will be monitoring much more frequently, which might drive further visits. Right. And for problem sites, so for example, I have someone who's sampling a Shotover every month.
Yeah.
But at least once a year is our target.
Thank you.
Gretchen, then Matt.
Sorry. This report does talk about probably more the regulatory end of compliance with the auditing and monitoring. Yeah, so those parts of it. But when you are thinking about, I suppose, okay, sorry, the paper probably is mainly on that, just the compliance targets, which are mainly around that. But there are some priorities like reduce non-compliant discharges to improve fresh water, which would require both those regulatory and the non-regulatory. So I'm just trying to understand when you're trying to make the targets with compliance, whether there's a strategy or work around the other stuff, because obviously compliance is also the education and all those types of things that happen as well. So how do you account for and plan all of that in the priority system, I suppose? Is there a way?
Sure.
Is it happening?
So firstly, yes, there are absolutely elements of compliance that are other than just hard audits and hard targets. The compliance team engages quite regularly in things like intensive winter grazing workshops and supporting teams across the directorate with that community work. I guess in terms of the targets, that's about setting, in my view, that's about the balance of where we set the target, and that we're not trying to set targets that have my staff out 40 hours a week doing audits, because we want them to be doing other stuff as well. We don't have hard numbers around that other stuff, but it's about creating some room in their work programs to have availability to respond to someone saying, hey, I've got a question, can you come out and have a conversation with me about this? Or we need someone to go to a workshop to speak to the rules.
And generally how we set that work up is through the work program that we have for our environmental implementation team and our catchment advisors, and that is a shared work program where we aim to deliver those key community engagement events. So around winter grazing and developer days and topic sessions. So
Matt, then Neil.
Thanks for the report. Just looking at paragraph 12, to me, it seems an impressive number in terms of 45% of consents receiving some form of monitoring each year. Is there any comparison with other regions around the country? Is that way more than not others? Is it the same? Is it under, and so point to the resource that you've got available to in terms of.
So there is a national comparison that's done in the CME metrics report, which I can circulate afterwards. I'm sorry, I don't have the figures to hand. That number of 45% is pushed very heavily, I think, by the investment the teams have done in improving the way we monitor water take and water quality data, so that many of those consents will be monitored on a desktop basis. Water take consents have an annual requirement at least to send us data. About 80% of them are sending us data every day. And Alex's team check those consents every year. And we've made significant improvements in technology to look at making sure we do check those. But that drives those numbers a lot and helps us, I guess, ensure that when we are getting out in the field to do audits, we're auditing the right consents and not just picking a cross-section of water takes, for example. We're looking at the ones with compliance issues because we've got that intelligence.
That report be
Neil.
I'm not trying to be picky, but will we develop a new plan that's got the right dates on it?
yes, so that is under development. We have had a session with councillors on developing that new plan. So the new one will come through for 2026 to 2029.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Perfect.
Right.
And it's coming to council in, I think it's August. August, yeah.
Understand the logic. Thank you.
Chanel.
Just paragraph 27. When will the ANR consenting deep dive occur? When would we expect to have something back from that? Is that
in terms of the priority action? So we're going to run that through audit and risk as part of the assurance work. So we're just pulling together the overall plan. So I don't have an answer. The overall plan for all of those priority actions, which will include time frames. So that's due to come back, or a sort of first cut of that. I think I'm due to get it from Andrew and general managers in July, and then we'll have a look at how we can fit that in amongst the other internal audits.
Thank you.
If there's no,
Happy for me to move there's no more questions?
Yeah.
I'm happy to move the recommendations set out.
moved, Andrew seconded, Kate. Debate.
Just very briefly, I think this compliance space is an important space that we are currently in, and even with the government, local government reforms, simplifying local government, the government have signalled clearly that the importance now and going forward will remain whatever entities are looking after things such as consents, etc. So important space now that we're in, and it may be someone else's role in a couple of years' time, but it will still be important for whoever's implementing these sorts of policies.
Gretchen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for this. It's really good to have clarity and transparency around what those priorities and targets look like, and on the monitoring and auditing of those. I think as we go forward, and yeah, as Councillor Nunes mentioned, it's important to have transparency and clarity around the role that ORC does play, or regional councils play. And that other space that's often invisible is that non-regulatory side, and in compliance that's really crucial as well, and something that we do and invest in. So making sure it's really visible, transparent through the work programs, that the priorities are embedded and prioritised in that manner as well. I'm thinking the earthworks, proactive workshops we've done, which have been so popular, many of those that happen, we just need to make sure that it's really transparent as well, that compliance is both ends of the spectrum, and it's a job that needs to be done to achieve effective compliance. So I know that staff have outlined that that does happen. Just need to make sure for ourselves as we go through LTP that we are looking at that and making sure that it's really clear. Thank you.
Kerry.
Thank you. Yeah. This paper and this this part of what we do has got some concern for me, and I think we are a consent issuer, we're a regulator, and with the evolution of the RMA and how consents evolve and are eventually granted, often those processes have ended up in mediated outcomes with consent conditions that were just a nonsense to be included. And we have an obligation then to monitor and manage that consent. And I think as then a regulator managing that, and how we choose to audit and what we choose to do with those audits, we have to exercise some discretion and look at the history and what sits with some of those consents and the practicalities that are attached to them. So it is a common theme out across those actually doing this stuff, that when an audit is being undertaken, some of the points being raised are not really affecting the environment. They are more about an administrative or management type issue. So I think all I'm doing is just urging some caution as we look into the future in how we manage our obligations.
Kevin.
Long-term plan. One thing we'll be looking at is mandatory activities and discretionary activities. And when you come to compliance, one big part of it that is exceptionally important is the discretionary part, which is the education programs that we do with people. So I don't think that certainly isn't mandatory, but it's clearly showing that approach is very, very effective. Under the new RMA, it is proposed that a lot more activities will become permitted activities. So those activities will need compliance monitoring. So again, that will reinforce the need for us to have education going strongly before the schedule of compliance tools are applied. So let's be very careful when we get into the long-term plan strategy that we are not diminishing our ability to go and do that non-regulatory stuff that is so important to ensure our communities can continue to do the jobs they wish to do.
If there are
Andrew,
no more
right,
questions,
right.
what reply? Thank you. My only comment, and it probably relates to Gary's point, would be when someone applies for a consent, they go through a process, and when that process is complete, you've got a lawfully established consent that is signed off by the regulatory authority and the applicant. So the actual consent conditions are agreed upon, whether it's gone through an environmental process or whatever. And I suppose all I'm saying is that in those situations, if someone isn't happy with those consent conditions that they've signed off at an earlier date, they would have to pursue some sort of review. And I'm not sure whether those reviews would be an automatic, well, they wouldn't be an automatic thing. There would have to be just some form of justification. So all I'm trying to say is monitoring conditions have been agreed to when the consent was originally approved by both parties. I have nothing further to say.
Might have been lucky that was a right of reply. Well, I'll put the motions. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Yeah.
Yeah.
We might be able to have one in tea. Moving on to 9.14, Community Survey Action Plan.
Kia ora, I'm Vicky. I'm a team lead in the marketing and comms team. And earlier this year, we came and presented the community survey results. And as a result of that, we went away and came up with an action plan that will be implemented over the next 12 months. So we've brought this to you today to either get approval or approval with amendments. I'll take it as read, or at least you've got any questions.
Wait a minute while people collect their thoughts in case there's about to be questions.
The question would be to the portfolio leads, you're the only one here. I presume that you're all over this and you're happy and supporting it, and both of you are.
1 out of 2 is not bad, Lars.
Consistency's good.
I have no issues. I'm not sure that whether Michael has. I haven't discussed it with him. Kevin, followed by Andrew.
Look, thanks for the report. On paragraph 6, we talk about optimising how ORC communicates. So is that going to be just more volume or more types? And are we actually checking the effectiveness of what we are currently doing and showing that that's demonstrating us good communication value?
Yeah. The survey provided a lot of really recent relevant data around comms channels that people are using in different regions. So we can use that data to better optimise what we're currently doing. With all our channels, by campaign, we do look at the effectiveness and the reach of that campaign through digital metrics and also reach through other channels. And from that, every campaign we build on the next campaign using that previous data to better reach our target audiences.
So just to clarify, so if from your survey, you see you missed he's gone now, all the people from Cromwell. So if you miss a specific area or a specific grouping of people, you will then target your communication so you pick them up next time.
Yes, correct. We go, if a campaign has identified a target audience, we look into all the channels available. So, for example, in Cromwell, we'd use the Cromwell Bulletin and newsletter. So we do look at what those campaign target audiences are and really look at the channels available in that area.
Thanks very much.
If I could just add to that one, I mean, the team are doing that iteratively as a campaign's underway. So if they can see that an area is underrepresented, they'll target and pivot some more advertising. The other thing we're also looking, led by Sarah, our manager, comms and marketing, we're looking at bringing some monthly reporting attached to Richard's chief executive's report around our comms impact across different measures, like we do for the customer data, just to provide a bit more visibility of how our communications engagement efforts are going and give you a bit more visibility on that. So that will start August. We're aiming to start that August so that it reports on July, and then it'll be a monthly report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the action plan attachment and just under environmental priorities, the last bullet point refers to when asked to narrow the selection to the single issue they consider most important to be economic and population growth, 19%, and good water quality, 18% were on top. So it's a political question. I read that as that's quite finely balanced. So is that a fair comment? Don't answer it if you don't feel like it.
Question, so don't answer it.
That's the attachment. At the sorry.
So I think that's data from the survey. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So in the attachment, the action plan, it just talks about the various bullet points. I'm just looking at environmental priorities, being the co-lead in environmental delivery, and I was just looking through those. And the last bullet point, it's finely balanced between what people were saying when they had to narrow down to one topic. It seems to be economic and population growth at 19% and good water quality at 18%. It's finely balanced is what I'm saying. And it's the obvious conclusion when you look at those percentages, but have I got anything wrong in that?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Matt, followed by Chanel.
Similar to the question I asked in the last portfolio, just regards to the rate of engagement across the community and how this compares with other parts of the country. Is there any comparison? I know you can look at year on year yourselves, but is there any stuff that you look at? It's just, is Otago way more engaging and active on this sort of stuff compared with Bay of Plenty? Or
I don't have any hard facts, but when we go to COMSIG meetings quite often, Otago Regional Council is the first to do something and try something. I think we're doing really well in that space, but I could definitely have a closer look at other regional council surveys and engagement measurements that they do.
And I think in terms of responding to the survey itself, we were well ahead of the targets we'd set for the survey provider. I can't remember the data off the top of my head, but out of the 14,000 letters that were sent out.
Oh yeah, the rate of response we definitely had a way more engaging than the other councils that she does surveys for.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Chanel.
Hi. If we go ahead with this action plan, how are we going to be able to differentiate between the changes in opinion that have occurred due to the quite substantial change in our work plan already and the impact of the action plan? How can we differentiate?
I don't think we would be able to exactly differentiate. If we do, we will bring for the part of the long-term plan discussions in the comms and marketing space a proposal to do another survey in 2 years. And I guess we'd be looking at the results of that survey and if there were improvements, we might be able to track that back to specific things, but chances are it will always be a mix of the different actions we're taking, and not even across the organisation.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. So when is the next big community survey, like the one we've just had, scheduled for?
So typically we did 3 years benchmarking, and then we moved to every second year. So in theory, we're due one in 2028. So we'll be bringing that. They're expensive though, so we'll be putting that in the budget for LTP planning, and that will be up to council whether they want to proceed with that or not.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed in an email of recent times from somebody that they took exception to us having, I wanted to say open days or workshops or meet the people times or whatever they are on, I think it was the pest management strategy. And there was half a dozen times come and see us at, or go online and have a look. And all the times were during the working day, and they were saying anybody who works can't come along. Do we take it? I mean, do we take any learnings from that? Do we change our comms in relation to that, or do we just decide that
Maybe
most people are
speak to
working?
that. So we do try and if I'm right, and I haven't been to them, but Joe has, we actually run them usually through the afternoon into the early evening to cater for both, and we get good turnout during the day. We do get people turn out, and we know we get people who come in the evenings after work. Kevin was in the Oamaru, he probably speak to it. I know Andrew was at the Dunedin one, so we very much try and cater. It's, we're balancing our own resources and the cost of those processes with trying to find ways in which we can make it accessible to everyone. And one way we have found it successful is to straddle that work day and early evening for people that are on the way home. So appreciating it's never perfect, but we feel we've got the balance. And the other thing we always tell people is if they want to talk about something, a staff member will always make themselves available, even if it's not a scheduled session. That's something we do pride ourselves on. So the opportunity is there for people who want to engage with us.
Thank you. No further questions? I will move this. Would somebody like to second it?
We do.
Seconded, Kevin. Debate. Chanel.
Thank you. I'm just going to signpost. I'm going to be voting to not support this action plan. The reason behind that is I support the survey, and I understand what our communities are telling us. Where I struggle is the leap from the survey results to the action plan, when we ourselves have just implemented a substantial work program to attempt to influence and improve community perceptions. So I see the survey as the baseline, and that's the individual measure of performance. I'm concerned that much of what's proposed here sits within normal management responsibilities around comms engagement. And I'd rather see council focus on delivering work we've already agreed to do, and use the next survey to assess whether that delivery is making a difference. Ultimately, I think confidence is earned through outcomes and performance, not through action plans about confidence.
Gretchen.
I just feel that we probably should respond there as well if we've got differing views, so I'm going to. I feel that recently we haven't done a substantial shift in where we're going. We are working through the work programs of the LTP, which are actually fairly consistent with where we were at. And so I feel that actually we are reflecting, basically based on what our communities have told us through this survey and what we need to focus on. So that's important because we have objectively looked at what the community is telling us here, around what they feel is important and what they'd like us to focus on, because it's not working for them or it is working for them. So I think that if we were wanting to give feedback on what the action plan should look like, we should give feedback on what the action plan should look like, because now is the time to do that. So encourage anyone that does want to actually do that to do that. Otherwise, I think from my perspective, it does reflect what we've heard through the survey and what our programs are. Thank you.
Richard? Sorry. Neil?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me from when we do surveys in communities is to be seen to do something with the information that we've got and what we've learned. And I think particularly as we move towards a new future, to carry on and understand still what the community view is going to be important for whatever the entities are that are going to be looking after that new future. So I think it is holding on us to carry on with the work we should be going to do and respond accordingly. Yes, you could wait and do it a year later, but the reality is that we don't know what's going to be around then. I think it's too late. So I think now's the time to do it and carry on with the work we've started. We'll soon find out, and it'll be good to find out whether the changes we might have made to our action plans are something that the community sees has been a good thing or not. So I'll be supporting where we're going forward with this paper. Thanks.
Kate?
Thank you. We've made an investment into doing the survey, and we've got some interesting results. I think I've got no problem with the action plan. The one thing as per se, in that us going forward with it, and in many ways, I think it's business as usual, and it's great that staff have brought it to us. The one area that I am surprised hasn't come up in this, and considering the portfolio leads, is the potential for us to look at how we interact with some of our service delivery, and that would be transport, for one, and understanding whether we should be looking at liaison groups. We've talked about it around this table, around the councillors' table a number of times, and to get a better understanding of that service delivery and what that looks like. So the potential for me would have been that we look at setting up liaison groups in some of those delivery areas just to get some more finesse about it. Maybe that's coming somewhere else through the transport team, I'm not sure. We've certainly talked about it, and that would be the only modification I'd do. Otherwise, I'm very happy to support what this work going forward. I do think we need to have a better idea of some of the other delivery. Sorry, I should have added, maybe the leads could tell me if that's coming a different way.
The
Mission. Statement here from
Alan?
I guess I'm just entering the debate here to say that, well, two things. One, yes, I think, agreed it's important after receiving this community survey that we do have an action plan and follow that up with actions. And I can note as one of the transport portfolio co-leads that the setting up of transport liaison groups is on our radar. And we will be progressing that with our General Manager in the very near future.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you. I'm going to agree with Chanel in that I was sort of struggling with this paper, and our engagement with our community and our community survey is so critical for how we're perceived by our ratepayers and the community as a whole. And I just don't feel we went far enough and detailed enough in what the action plan would be. So I'll be voting against.
Matt?
From a research process point of view, I think it's valid to continue with a survey in terms of showing trends over time, but I do think there's opportunities for more and more understanding of true community perception. So I think this is adequate in terms of the process outlined, but I think things like the liaison groups that we want to get done through PT and other stuff like that, we actually need to be feed that all into the same system so that we've got consistency of a baseline measurement, but also what else can we get out that provides similar feedback in a different forum or a different style. So I'll support this, but I'm keen for more basically.
Kevin.
I assume, and this is a question that I'll leave. I assume that the portfolio leads have a pair of email traffic from councillors wishing to make changes to the strategy, that they have powers of them to delve over and look over in the next wee while as we consider this plan. So I presume, and we've had these papers for a couple of weeks just about, so I assume if there's inconsistencies or worries, I assume that I'll be able to have a yarn to the portfolio leads and find plenty of alternatives and solutions.
As the only available portfolio lead at present, comms is, as we, and this whole area is, as has been mentioned by our staff, something that's under constant revision. And I guess that speaks also to Kevin's concern, if I can express it that way, that this ought to be ongoing and changeable and movable, and where we're getting on with doing things. It's a area that isn't, it's a sort of a connecting area rather than we don't have comms people going off and doing things as if it's a thing on its own. It's intended to be responsive to requirements from all sorts of other places, including this survey. So I see it, although the action plan needs to be presented, we do need to have an answer to what we're doing with the community survey. I see this as something that is an ever evolving area. So I don't think we set it in place and think, okay, we agreed to that. What we are doing is saying, here's the basis, here's the starting. And we're starting off with it, people coming back to us and saying, well, monthly, we'll hear back from our staff about where they're going with this. So I'm comfortable, although it isn't as if we're a perfect answer, it never would be. And it's an evolving plan. It needs to start somewhere, and this is where it can start. So I'm more than happy to endorse this.
What on earth are you talking about? I don't know.
Michael, you can hear me?
So you're just about to put that was your right response, so we'll now bring it to the vote, Chair. Is that correct?
I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Who was against? Anyone else was against?
Gary and Chanel.
Want to supplement
as well. Now.
Sneezed.
Oh.
Kind of went away partway through.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, he does.
Wow. No, it probably does.
We're definitely having a workshop.
And 15.
Yeah.
We can ask questions.
Gary's looking for questions.
Have I
Yeah, you're right.
somebody who would like to move the motion of an adjournment for 15 minutes for a tea break?
Thank you.
Moved Andrew, seconded Kevin. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
What's next?
Resuming our council meeting.
No one.
We have got to the paper on local government reform, which is described now as 1.1
One on the supplement.
on the supplementary order paper. So did you,
I'll speak to this one. I'll just let everyone find the paper. It's not a different package and do it.
Oh, yes.
you've got that, Michael, on your supplementary agenda? The beginning 1.1 on your supplementary agenda.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, councillors. So at our last council meeting, we committed to writing a paper that sort of really just provides a broad outline of current simplification or simplifying local government package, what ORC's role is and is not in that, provides some demographics of Otago, speaks to ORC's functions. Despite the headline in the paper, it doesn't set out a preferred method because that's not the role of staff in this instance. It's purely to provide some information to enable the table to have a discussion about the current reform process the government is running, and I guess to determine if you choose to a sort of way forward. I'm happy to answer any questions, but as I say, we have shared some information about the role of councils. We have staff working in a working group under the direction of the Mayoral Forum, which includes the chair, to provide some further information to input into the work that's currently underway that will help inform the future conversations that need to happen. But hopefully what was in the report, and just acknowledging a lot of work that Andrea did to pull this together, just gives a bit of a sense for some of our functions, for the importance of them in Otago, what a change in sort of scale of delivery would mean. But really the purpose of this report, as discussed at the last council meeting, is to enable you all to have a conversation about reform. So I'll leave it at that. Can try and answer any questions people have got, and then we'll leave it in the chair's hands from there.
Right, questions? Michael.
Thank you. And thank you, Hilary and Richard for this paper. I'm just looking at on the executive summary, clause 4, in which it is stated as staff advice that the government's stated preference is for a single unitary authority for each region. And then it goes on, with more than one considered only where a region is large and has significant complexity. Hilary, Kevin and I met with Chris Bishop, who's very much driving this process. And I didn't get the idea that he was suggesting that to me. So I just wondered if there's a piece of paper that I haven't read that allows you to come to that conclusion. He actually talked about bespoke solutions. We raised a number of, Kevin and Hilary were there as well, we raised some particular issues around Otago, for example. But it wasn't my impression from that meeting that he had come to, or the government had come to, any fixed view as to what the outcomes would be, and that they were open to the suggestion of bespoke solutions should they be proffered and make sense. In subsequent conversations with both New Zealand First and with the ACT parties, they similarly suggested, both David Seymour and Andy Foster, the two people from those parties, that they weren't convinced necessarily. In fact, David Seymour made that quite clear, that necessarily the regional unitary model would be the one that would be followed. So I'm just relaying oral conversations with those three individuals. I'm just interested if there's a piece of paper that I haven't seen that reaches the conclusion that is stated in paragraph 4.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good question. So the reference to government is DIA's Head Start proposal document, the policy document. So on page 6, there's a couple of references, and that is our conclusion in terms of the executive summary, and I acknowledge that there will be different positions within the government. In that policy document states the most straightforward approach is for all councils in a region to combine to form a single unitary authority, and then further down, more than one unitary authority in a region is only likely to be approved if, and then it lists off some criteria. So from that, we took that as the starting point and the direction that's come from that Head Start policy, but acknowledge that there will be, you have obviously received different messages, and acknowledge that the process that is available in a Head Start does allow other alternatives other than a single unitary. But that's the document.
Madam Chair,
page 6 is the reference.
Yeah, no, and thank you. Madam Chair, if you just indulge me for 1 second, please, if I might. The DIA are a bunch of bureaucrats, as we know. The final decisions will be made by politicians. And were this centre-right coalition to be re-elected, comprising of 3 parties, it might be, on the basis of the poll this week, the other centre-left coalition. But I just wanted to make sure, Richard, that in all future papers that come before, we make sure that we've got a political lens that overlies rather than just bureaucrats, because ultimately the decision will be made by elected politicians rather than by bureaucrats in Wellington, yeah?
Yeah, and I suppose I'm not involved in those conversations that you're having with, so it's often difficult for me to apply that political lens, but I do, we can be more specific when we are referencing government agencies representing government as opposed to government itself.
I think perhaps, Michael, where the two meet is that once you look at the documents that have come from and it's not just the officials, the Head Start documents are approved by political people at the end of the day, there does seem to be a likelihood that you need enough people or enough ratepayers, because some of it's being thought of economically, but you need enough ratepayers to get together to try and perform the functions of a unitary council, and that leads you to likely one rather than more than one. So I think that's sort of where it came from, but I think it comes from the politicians as well, thinking if there's not enough people here, so they're saying words like bespoke to us, but bespoke only if you're big enough. If there's enough of you is sort of what we're hearing, I think. So it's sort of.
I understand what you're saying. It's just that you'll remember a conversation we had in Chris Bishop's room, in which he specifically mentioned Hamilton and Tauranga as maybe, so it doesn't disagree with what you say, Hilary, at all. You need a population base. Good luck, Chatham Islands. But you need a population base around which to base a unitary authority. But he was suggesting that in the case of both Hamilton and Tauranga, he just gave them as examples, a bespoke solution may be separate from a regional unitary authority. And that's just where I'm saying that we need to have that on the table in our future discussion as well.
Yes, they're also, I think, politically making it clear that they're not likely to isolate an urban area and have the rest of it being, but that's sort of just what I'm hearing from a combination of things. I think we can run this session, not necessarily questions, then debate. Just let's see where it goes. Let's let it flow for a wee while and give people a chance to make contributions. Starting with Gretchen.
My question is around the process from here, and obviously we've got the Head Start. The Head Start process, and then we've got something else beyond that. There's been some talk of possibly only a few proposals that might be ready, I suppose, in a Head Start sense, and government might want to look at those, but we don't know that, obviously, we're not the government. But those ones are a long way down the track and have been through a fairly robust process. There's a lot of risk if they're not. They need to be supported by a community and they need to be exposed to the community so they're used to that idea. Otherwise, there's too much risk for the government or for the local bodies. So I would imagine that there would be a robust process that happens. I think that many of the ministers involved are those types of people too. They want an outcome that makes sense, that's supported, logical, well-founded, big enough, maybe bespoke, but needs to have gone through a process, not just quickly come up with. So is there any sense of what's going to happen there? Do we know any more about that? Does it seem as though that would be the case rather than we put something in at Head Start and they'll run with it?
So the most recent response I've heard on that would have been Monday night, where the Minister for Local Government spoke on an LGNZ call and was very clear that there is no emphasis or thinking at the moment on the backstop process. Their focus is entirely on Head Start and having groups get ahead of the process and engage in that. He has acknowledged previously the questions from councils around community engagement and sort of responding to concerns about the ability for councils to take communities along in this process. But again, I think the quote that I have heard is they are looking for councils to provide leadership in this space, and it will be up to councils how they choose to engage with their communities. So there is no further detail on what's being called the backstop process. They are very clear, and Minister Watts was very clear again on Monday night that their focus is on having as many councils as possible engaged in the Head Start process. He also responded to a question around the limited numbers and the suggestion that they would only take 4 or 5, and said that that is not a position of the government. They are open to as many of these as possible. They'll obviously have to be assessed against the criteria, but there's no predetermined sort of number of proposals that they will accept. So that's as much as we have. There is a total absence of information about the backstop process, but they have been very clear that that is intentional at the moment because of where their focus lies.
The most recent mayoral forum process that we had was, I thought, a very constructive and useful session at the end of last week, was it? You were there, yeah. Where the mayors and me in a room and the CEs, so there's like 12 of us, we're talking about what principles people would want used to decide whether one option might be better than another option. So I wasn't talking about options, but about methods of responding to what would be, and what, because we've now got results of the survey come back as to what issues people have. So we then were looking at what principles might be being used to make the decision, and that will come out shortly, I think, where people were heading towards, which were principles of accountability, of ensuring local voices were heard. What was the third major one? Yeah. We had some discussion about feeling of having equity as a principle in there, although we weren't able to be quite clear about what that would mean. And there was some suggestion around the room that it was difficult because whatever you do.
I'm going to read them out.
Yeah.
Protect and enhance Otago environment was 1, local voice representation, Otago identity was 2, value, affordability and long-term sustainability was 3, innovation and future focus was 4, and equity, fairness, transparency and integrity was 5. And noting they are draft, they were it's the notes that were collected and have been circulated back to the mayors and chair for feedback to Amanda and the team.
And what the one which was innovation and things came up with was the intention was to not be bound by what we've done in the past, but be open to doing things differently in the future and having different boundaries and different things as we move forward. So that's moving people's thinking onwards about the mayor's thinking onwards, and there's a timetable about getting things back and forwards from councillors and to mayors and the issues that people have, because of course Waitaki has got a different lot of issues because it's got a leg in either side, and so they're having meetings. I think Kevin might want to talk to the meetings that are happening up there.
I could do that. There is a series of public meetings solely on amalgamation. Waitaki has hit the news on some various other issues, but we've had the first meeting at Otamatata, Palmerston, Napara, and the Oamaru Opera House, and they are focused solely on getting a position from the community as to where the Waitaki should move. They've got four options. To be fair, I have only got one in my mind, and I'm quite happy to stick with that. But their options are to split. One was to split the Waitaki, and some go north, some go south. Another was to be part of a central South Island Unitary Authority, which is the Waitaki, Mid Canterbury, South Canterbury. The other was status quo, and the other one was to move the entire Waitaki into Otago. So that's the four options that are being canvassed. Waitaki, and this, I know this is public, Waitaki is part of Otago. When greeted in Otamatata from people from right up to Twizel, right through the Haka Valley, that said, please get us to Otago. That is the sentiment that is coming to me loud and strong. Whether others go that way, the clear sentiment also being promoted is, and I'm assisting in that promotion, that whatever happens is that Waitaki catchment needs to be in one catchment, and that is also, if you look at going back to simplifying our local government, the catchments need to form part of those boundaries. So that would be bringing the Waitaki catchment back into originally the head office of that was in Kurau when that was in existence. So that would be bringing that whole Waitaki catchment back into Otago. So those meetings are over the next week, and then Waitaki Council will consider those options from there.
Just to follow up with that, Kevin, it was agreed that Waitaki would write to the Minister asking whether they would contemplate having a catchment authority or a catchment area in Waitaki, which was separate. So having I think it was described as a Waitaki something authority or something, but whether they would be prepared to look at that as one catchment, to 4 catchment things, as opposed to the unitary thing. So that would be a bespoke sort of option. So whatever you did with the general unitary authority principle, you would have an authority whose job it was to look after that catchment. So we want to, with your indulgence, I'll go around the room asking.
Could I just go back to, if I could just go back to the initial parts and some other discussions we've been having, so Gretchen was talking about how people are more advanced than others. So on Monday morning I attended, we're having basically a weekly catch up at the moment with all chairs and deputy chairs of regional councils throughout New Zealand. So it's really been interesting to gauge the position where everyone is at. And so it would be fair to say that most regions have only started in this process. While there may have been sentiments of joining things together in bits and pieces in the past, it really has only happened since the November announcement. Apart from, I would say, Southland is in a process. Southland, it's quite public, have been informed by the Minister of Local Government that yes, he's very happy that they are in that process, but would like them to go into the Head Start process, but not to consider anything other than one unitary authority for Southland. So that's the instruction they've been given. We look at the Bay of Plenty, just from the reports, the Bay of Plenty has come out with which I believe is a very good model that shows how representation can still happen throughout combined unitary authority, as opposed to having, they might have 8 or 9 councils, and can be corrected on that, but they have a very good model that they put out. And I think that the latest report, from being one big unitary, they are also, the goalposts are moving around quite a bit, but there is a general intent from most to get into this Head Start process, to be actually in a place where the initial concepts can be further advanced and further explored, rather than sitting for the backstop process that I understand, talking to the ministers, they deliberately haven't set what the backstop process is, because they will look at, my understanding, but they'll look at what others have put before them, and then they will take what they believe will be the best scenarios and give them to the regions that have not entered. So will be dictated to what should be happening. Hawke's Bay, Canterbury are meeting this week at Lincoln. By Canterbury, that's all councillors from the whole region are meeting in a workshop in Lincoln this week to go through the whole process, just to get a greater understanding and realisation. What's come really clear, and I just again thank Richard and his team for the work that they've put together around regional council functions. It is exceptionally clear that the majority of territorial authorities do not understand the functions that they will need to carry out and need to consider when they are forming whatever they do form. Otago, it's pretty. I just think it's time for Otago to step up and be Otago, which goes from the Waitaki catchment south. It will be exceptionally good and powerful of us to link with Southland to join whatever they're trying to do and show us as a united voice. We're the productive powerhouse of the country when it comes to agricultural production and, of course, tourism, which is absolutely critical to the whole New Zealand economy. But we've often had a splintered voice. We need to combine the southern region and make it exceptionally strong, not splinter some of us going north. It needs to be a strong Otago. We will sort out debt We will sort out representation models. I can't see any issue with that at all, but it needs strong leadership to ensure that this region finally gets back to where it used to be many years ago as a powerhouse for the country, and being able to lobby with government to say, this is where it all comes from, so let's get back here and get this area working. So get into head start, that's all I'm saying. But I will say more as we go.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions. Well,
if we move around the room and anyone who isn't up to having their tuppence worth now we'll return to them later. We'll just see if you would like to present either partly questions that are in your head or partly the thoughts that you're currently having or whatever. And we'll try and take that collective sort of vibe on as we continue these discussions. But starting therefore with Chanel, if she's ready to make a contribution.
Just want to know what we're being asked to do. So do you want to know our position on the paper or where I would like to see us go as a council, or what are you asking me?
Where you would like to see us go based on whatever, whether it's gut reaction or this paper, or having looked at the paper and with it, whatever reaction you have to
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the paper. I'm also, and I think I've stated it earlier, I think the government has clearly asked us to go bigger, and I think that we ought to do that by sweeping in as much of the region as we possibly can and extend north as much as we can. But in this entire process, we are not the leaders, we are the followers. So I think the papers that have been put together to help enable conversations and the current advocacy that's already been done by those around the table, such like Kevin and you, I'm comfortable with the direction that we're headed.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the update on the Mayoral Forum survey and looking forward to what more comes out of that as well, because I think that's going to give us a pretty good steer about the community views to an extent, because I don't know that there's all parts of the community are actively engaging. Really good to hear about what's happening in the Waitaki. They just seem to be doing everything so well. But I'm looking forward to hearing what happens in terms of community engagement in other parts of the region. It would be useful for me to understand too the extent of the Waitaki catchment and see how that fits with the current Otago catchment. I think I know, but my gut feel says it goes to Tekabo, and all of a sudden you go, that's a
Corley River,
right
up the top. Corley
River, yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
always was.
So it's sort of something that I'm old enough to remember the Waitaki catchment board days, but a whole lot of people have got no probably appreciation of the extent of that. So I think it'd be good just to maybe see some collateral that says, hey, here goes what would happen if you brought the whole Waitaki catchment in. I think it's always bemused a lot of us as to why they done what they did in the 80s with the reorganisation and drew a line down the middle of a creek. It didn't make much sense to me. It still doesn't. So I'd like to understand that better. The concept of a bespoke sort of catchment authority for the Waitaki, and my immediate question is saying, well, if you do that there, then I can see a whole lot of other people just lining up saying, well, do it here and do it here and do it here. And so part of me sort of says there's probably some work to be done in that space to understand why you'd have a bespoke for the likes of the Waitaki perhaps, and not for the Clutha, for argument's sake. And I have no preference either way, but I think it's really good to say, well, actually, with the bespoke outcomes that have been talked about, could you end up in catchment authorities?
I could answer just briefly why it had come to that was because we've got the Clutha, and it's better to have them in one unitary if you can. It's only if you've got a problem that needs a solution and you're just paralysed because you can't do anything because you can't figure out what to do with it, then that's a plan B, sort of, to answer your question. Whether it's a good answer or not.
Yeah, no, I think I get the grasp of that, but still think it means that the other part of what I was talking about is live and saying, well, actually, if you can make the bespoke case there, then I'm sure some people would do that for the Reti or the Parima or wherever else as well. Well, we're special enough to, have this and that. And I'm just mindful of the conversation in Southland at the moment, where I'm not sure the ICC and SDC are going to get to the same path forward. But yeah, the key thing for me is that to see the community engagement, and it's like with what Councillor Malcolm talked about is happening in the Waitaki, I'm looking forward to that happening elsewhere, and I just hope the other TAs are picking that up. Haven't been away for a bit lately, I'm not sure quite up to speed, but that will be, I think, very important for us going forward. And yeah, it's like the concept of a unitary makes a whole lot of sense without a doubt. And yes, there is that issue with the Waitaki, work out how that could be accommodated, and I think we've got a good solution going forward. That said, I know there's some concerns in the wider patch where I come from with Queenstown, and you know that's no surprise to anybody. I don't think that's something to be scared of. I think it's a challenge to work through and get a good outcome for the whole community, not just Queenstown, but the wider region as well. So should we put up by that? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where we get.
Thank you, Matt.
Couple of questions first. Thanks, Richard, for the paper and for including the statement of financial position. That's just for the Otago Regional Council. Has consideration through the mayoral forum been to giving a statement of financial position for all 6 councils in the Otago region?
So there's some work being undertaken at the moment by Morrison Lowe to pull together, I guess, a picture of the region, which would include amalgamating all of the financial data and the stuff that underpins all of the councils, and then also looking at how that might apply to the different models. So that's part of the work the mayoral forum's tasked us to go away and do.
Okay, and I take it that'll also include the dividends that or the losses that the various assets across the region.
I can't speak to the level of detail, but it's all being considered as part of the package. So
yeah, great. I mean, I think in terms of community engagement and understanding of relevance of much of this change, which all sounds all very irrelevant to a lot of people, it does bring attention to these sort of things when people understand the implication on their pockets. You know, if the Port Otago provides the Otago Regional Council with $20 million dividend, so that reduces the rate. The Queenstown Airport produces a dividend for the Queenstown Lakes District ratepayers as well. But other entities across the region are not so well set up. So I think that'll be really important, and that information is well shared, because I think that will trigger some engagement with people when they understand that the profits of one, you know, you might end up with 3 airports all in one organisation, for example, as a result of a merger, and the benefit for a community that you previously had a dividend might be lost. And I point that out because I think it was the CODC survey, or one of the documents that came through was that the number 1 list on the community feedback was the expectation of saving at rates. And I just hope that that's part of the wavelength that the mayoral forum and research is looking at that as a lens for the community they're looking on. But time is obviously limited.
There was only one survey. All the councils ran the same survey.
There's the same survey. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I think that was the number 1 ranking issue, wasn't it? Yeah. And whether that's realistic or not, I guess no one knows. And the other thing I think that's topical is getting an understanding on the representation, and regardless of it's almost regardless of the boundaries, because the boundaries will be bigger than what people are used to. So what consideration, and I haven't read the detail, but I'm aware that maybe, for example, the catchment boards or community boards and the structure that's there, how well is that being articulated, and can it be better communicated? Because I think that's where people are going to go, okay, so there's going to be bigger catchment, or sorry, bigger territorial council responsibility for an area, or an area that the council's got bigger responsibility for. What does that mean for me at a community level and a catchment management level, and how's it going to relate to the representation that people have in the community? So I think that needs to be articulated as well. So thank you.
The survey, Truth is doing another survey of their own as well. At the moment, I don't know where they're up to with it. There was more feedback from Central Otago in proportion, and that's partly because Tamer has encouraged it on Facebook and various social media places and has really got their community more engaged. Queenstown Lakes, I think, has got 1% of their population responding or something. So any help anybody can do to encourage.
So the survey response rate was, you know, as a percentage of population, it was there were a number of I can't remember what the exact figure was, but it wasn't super high, but there were responses around the region. Each of the territorial authorities is now thinking about what further conversations they want to have, and they will have those separately within their own boundaries. And some of them are doing what Waitaki are doing currently. Others are looking at further online surveys. Queenstown are looking at similar to Waitaki in terms of community meetings. So there's a whole lot more engagement that will be happening. Now we've got the sort of the general regional sort of early engagement out of the way. There's a whole lot more engagement that will happen within each of the boundaries of the TAs that will then help them step through the next processes they have to step through, which is, what might a preference be? Do they want to be part of Head Start? All of those questions they're going to need to answer in a relatively short time frame.
Gary.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the Waitaki one, Neil touched on it, and I was keen to explore further with the other asset from the Waitaki over there. The Waitaki boundaries, like if we're going to take an entirely catchment focus, then if we're including the Hacker, if we're including, say, Tekapo, then that's part of Waimate District Council, it's part of Mackenzie District Council. So then in those Waitaki discussions, are they exploring with those other councils of division so that you would look at a catchment focus? Because from a regional council perspective, catchments are really useful. From a district council perspective, the catchment element is probably not as important. And of course, if we're moving to unitaries, then the regional functions coupled with the district functions are collective together. So it does actually make more sense to look at an entirely catchment focus. So is that the thinking? Is that what those councils are doing?
I am not over the talks that Waitaki are having with their neighbours Mackenzie and Waimate. My position and my thoughts are garnered from the people within the community that I am talking with, that are probably the key stakeholders in the region. And when I look, and if you refer back to what we're doing through 23-24 with combining the Waitaki River into one management plan, and we were working with the Runaka to do that. That position has certainly not changed. And I was at Mauraki with the team from Mauraki 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and they reaffirmed that they wish the Waitaki to be managed as one entity. So that's the whole catchment. And the words were, it flows south, it should be south. So again, and you've already got the Waitaki Catchment Amendment Act that looks after the river as a whole. So it needs to be with one authority. Yes, so that boundary line could be the boundary line of the mountain ranges, which would, if you look up Fairlie Way, that would put Fairlie north and everything on that line down with the catchment. So there needs to be some reconfiguration. Simon Upton, the Commissioner for the Environment, I think that's his.
Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment.
Yeah. If you were on LGNZ workshops with him a couple of weeks ago, it was very clear that since catchments were formed since 1941, I think was the date he said, that is the logical way for us to be looking after our environments. And so if we're putting communities of interest together, it's within those catchments that you have that best way to look after your catchments. So yes, there is some lobbying and some thinking to do when you're changing a split, something that is split and was probably wrongly split in 1989.
So if we look at how we live with the split currently, so if this pushed merge hadn't come on us, how onerous is the split for our functionality with the current split that we have? Like, it creates some issues, I suppose, but we've got the opportunity. Would we say that actually embracing that now to take that entire catchment is just a must, because that is the only sensible thing to do. We've lived with an illogical position for too long. Or is it less than that, that actually you could live with a split?
Well, can I, with your indulgence, Chair, it's a really interesting one, because if you look at the top boundaries of the Waitaki now that we don't have, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, the ambulance service, civil defence and emergency, all goes right up to Twizel. So all that's done from Otago. So already we have which just doesn't add up to me, that the river and all those services are already there. So I've got no those people. There's 14 teams of netball come from Twizel every week down into Oamaru. So I don't think it's a serviceability thing at all, Gary. It's just it's a mindset that says that's already happening. So it's just a continuation of that mindset.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can answer briefly that currently Canterbury sort of manages some bits and we consent some bits, and there is a sort of vaguely workable thing, but we can do a lot better since we're changing things. But my worry about throwing a whole lot of options around there into the mix, which is why I'm quite keen on Plan A, it all being ours or all being north, or having an authority that looks after that catchment. My worry is if there's too many things thrown into the mix, and that just confuses, and if you're trying to consult with people, they're just going to go into a wee paralysed thing about it, and we won't have any answers at all. You know, what to do with ourselves, I don't know. You know, it's just too complicated for consultation, I think.
Yeah, no, and I guess from my perspective, the overall picture, I'm very happy that you and Kevin are doing a very good job on our behalf with the interaction that you're having. And I mean, anything we can do at our more local level, a bit closer to the piece with some of our fellow councillors in our regions, then we will do to assist. But keep up the good job.
Thank you. Michael.
What have I done wrong?
We're moving around the table to ask people for their sort of thoughts and dreams and questions and whatever. We've got to you.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that none of us were elected with a mandate to towards local government reform. We're making this up as we go along. And so I'm wary of the fact that I need to represent the community that I represent on this issue and find out what they think. And I'm not sure because our communities have had very little consideration of this. And there's a great danger that just the loudest voices or a very few people will shape the input for a reform that is going to affect everybody. I also want to note that in the previous iterations of councils, when amalgamation has been discussed and driven largely by the Local Government Commission from memory, they have conducted a proper consultation with communities, and they have used the referendum process to divine what people really think. And I think whatever endpoint we get to with the options, we should be promoting referendum throughout the Otago region as the preferred options so that all of the public can have a say and not just the few. And that, to me, is the greatest danger that accompanies this process at the moment. I'm ambivalent as to that final outcome personally, as to what the structures look like. I can see at least 2 or 3 credible scenarios for unitary authorities in the Otago region and or involving the Otago region. But I do need, I think we do need to arrive at an endpoint where the decision is made by the ratepayers and residents of our region and not by us. Finally, the question of Queenstown for me is premier, just in the short term. They have their own unique problems, which no other district faces in this country, and will not be solved by being a part of Otago or Otago Southland or whatever structure might arrive. There is a question about whether or not you draw a circle, and it would be around Queenstown, and say that is a special place in New Zealand. It requires a combination of community and central government to look after it. And I don't think we should walk away from that as being an option that we give that particular community. So that's where I'm thinking at the moment. I will stress throughout this process the need for all residents of Otago to determine the final outcome of what our region looks like. Thank you.
Can I have a question of Councillor of Michael? We're on first name basis.
Yes.
Michael, in '89, it wasn't all done by referenda.
No,
it
wasn't. Which is why a whole series of mistakes were made, Kevin, and why.
Cool. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Okay, but it has been done since, and the Local Government Commission, when they've looked at amalgamations of districts, have instituted referenda to divine the views of communities.
At this stage, is that I don't understand, Michael, whether you would want us to go into a head start, because I presume we couldn't, because we can't have a referendum between now and then, or whether you would like us to go into backstop and therefore let the government do what it does to us, which is probably not going to be by referenda.
I don't think you've framed the premise of the question appropriately. This is going to be a political decision, and really it's time for a little bit of realpolitik around our table. This is a political decision that will be made in Wellington. It won't be made in Otago, and it won't be made around this table. There are 3 coalition partners, and it was made very clear to me that they have 3 very different ideas about what local government reform is going to look like. You're dealing with one of them at the moment. In October, it is entirely possible there'll be a change of government, in which case you'll be dealing with Tangi Utikere, Labour leading on this issue, who's desirous again of reform, but isn't necessarily wedded to any particular local government reform outcome. We don't know what the position, pardon me, of the Green or Opportunities parties are, who are likely to make up a centre-left coalition. So I'm just wary of the fact of coming up with a solution now when the political environment is so fluid and there's a general election in 4 months' time.
Thank you, Michael. Kevin.
I'll come back for later.
Andrew.
Okay, I think, and I've said this before, I think we've got the opportunity to give our best possible shot for reform on behalf of our community. That's probably number one. Number two, trying to read the tea leaves around unitaries, the size of them, etc. It seems that Southland have been told that you can't have 2, you either have 1 or you take the back door, so to speak. So I'm reading into that Otago's option is obviously 1. A spatial plan process, they've made that clear that they want 17 spatial plans for the country. So once again, that's probably another strong pointed towards a regional unitary authority. Hilary, I like the sound of the process that you're going through with the mayors, or collectively with the mayors, around looking at principles rather than outcomes, because I think the conversation we've had in the last half an hour, boundaries, and we can get tied up in all that, but I think the principles, if they're developed and agreed upon, then that'll determine the outcome rather than looking at the outcome and then working back the other way. So that's great. I do wonder whether, with regards to local government reform, whether we can learn anything from across the ditch. They've gone through lots of local government reform in Australia over the years. They haven't, my understanding, it's happened, I don't know about regularly, but they haven't had one hit at it. It's been an ongoing process for many years. And I just wondered, particularly trying to encourage different communities coming together as one. I just wondered whether there's anything we can learn from across the ditch. I suppose the last thing is around, and Richard's alluded to this, about clearly defining our functions to our TA colleagues in the regions, but really trying to push, and I know it's in the paper there, trying to push the benefits of the effectiveness and efficiency of a region delivering services and functions for our people, or our citizens. If there's some further positives that we can hang our hat on and drive just to help to sell the whole process, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Yep, I agree really strongly with Kevin's words that Otago is stronger together. We just have to have that approach. I agree there. I actually strongly agree with Michael Laws as well, that now isn't the time to be pushing something quickly. I think that there's too many risks there. There's too many risks for community to get this right, for pushback, for risk for the government, for many reasons. I think politically it looks good to have all the councils come together and agree with your proposal, but actually the councils pushed for this themselves and asked the government for ages, can you please look at what you could do that helps us to reform? So actually we're there, we're totally there. We can portray that, but actually as a country, we need to be coming together and doing this. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems. If you drive around rural New Zealand, there are mailboxes and they are certain colours, and people feel extremely passionate about where they're from, and they're going to push back big time if they think that they're not being heard, and that's a big risk for all of us. So yeah, as we drive up through the Waitaki, we've got either blue or we've got either black or red, and it's pretty clear. Now, working as well inland at the moment through the regional deal, that's been awesome, and we've actually had a really important role as the regional council, a privileged role to be able to work there as well. But I think we all remember that recently Wanaka tried to break away from Queenstown. We tried to do a future development strategy, and we had Queenstown thinking, well, we probably don't want to have Cromwell in there, or we'll only do it with Cromwell, or, you know, we've got people across Otago that think I'm unique. That's good, but Dunedin thinks it's quite unique as well. So does Mataura, which isn't part of Otago, but hey, all the small places, Waitahuna probably thinks it's really unique too, and it is. It's got some clear issues that are very different from Queenstown's. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be working together, because we are way stronger together and we absolutely need each other. We need to be able to demonstrate what that looks like. That's the problem, and this is where we'll lose communities. that local catchment scale isn't clear to them at the moment how that might work. It doesn't mean that you have to pay for another person's debt. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose your voice, but they also don't want to be replicated and costing a whole lot more either through that process. So what does that actually look like? I think we all need a bit of a robust process at this point that involves, I mean, sure, we've done a little bit of a survey, that's good, but once it gets momentum in the wrong direction, it's not just us in Otago that could cause that. That could be driven from any region in New Zealand that gets traction through the media, etc. We need to be doing this well as a country. Hey, what are we doing right now? We're not the leaders in this. We've been told to be quiet and sit in our corners, but actually we are elected as leaders regionally. We're in a unique position. We are the Otago Regional Council. Already we play roles that are really important, where we bring people together, like the regional deal, like joint committees, etc. We have been able to demonstrate, even in the mayoral forum, we're the different voice to many others. So it's important that we, and so thanks for bringing the paper. We can be useful in this space, and we are. And as our Deputy Chair and Chair have already spoken about, we're not saying actually in our corner. We're doing some really helpful stuff, and we need to continue to do that. So encourage that, appreciate this. What we can do is different from what the perception probably is. So we need to be doing that role, and we can do it really well, I think. So, yeah, that's enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks. It is thoroughly irresponsible that the government has set up a process that is pushing councils into making rushed decisions. That process, that rush does not give councils adequate time to consider the complex issues involved, nor to consult their communities effectively, and we don't have to buy into that. It seems to me this is an ideal opportunity for decision-making via a citizens' assembly that would have to be properly resourced, and I'm happy to discuss that further. But in any case, council should set up a process that properly informs and then listens to community views on the issues. And we don't need to do that in time for Head Start. I agree with a lot of what Michael said around this, I must say. It's not simple, and there is a strong tension between the need for scale for environmental management and for achieving local representation. We've heard about some of the complexities around Waitaki, for example. In this paper, the principles in paragraph 15 that we set out earlier, all that still applies, and I believe we really should invest the time to do that properly. Around all these reorganisation proposals, I do note that they don't address any of the issues around the underlying issues around local government funding. And so it's a great shame that that opportunity hasn't been taken to look at those funding issues as well, because whatever form of local government results, those will remain. But I guess going back to what some others have said, the importance of informing our communities well and then listening to them and making a very good decision, and that's going to take longer to get to than the 9th of August.
Thank you, Kate.
I agree with much of what's been said around the table. I think for me, let's make sure we've got the principles right, and I think they need some bearing out. I am, and I you know, one of them is obviously the catchment size, the catchment as a whole, and try and get those that make a sensible lens. I think we also have to be careful, and we haven't talked about West Coast. I think West Coast is could go a number of ways, but if we were going to take in Mackenzie, and potentially we would be looking at up to Franz Joseph of the Westland. They have got many issues that are similar to some of the other parts of Otago. And I say that just because I think the population base there is going to be really difficult. And if the north goes to Nelson, yeah, and the middle might go to Canterbury. So I'm just saying, can we please make sure that no area is left stranded? It's really as part of those principles. I think we have a leadership role because we're not the decision makers and we won't be doing that, to get good data and put it together and make it available to whomsoever wants to have those discussions. And we have potential leadership role in making sure people are well informed. Part of that is, and one of those principles is making sure we understand what the economic drivers are and making sure that there is both synergies, but no, we're not putting like everything into rural, and that there's a balance of the economy as well, for example. Those sort of principles are things that I think we could be working on and stand back and see what pulls out of it. But being the people that, because we are not making decisions, are informing the community and much more broadly than just the Otago that we've got at the moment. I was in Southland earlier in the week, and there's discussions of Gore going to Otago. Now that would, they could do whatever they like, but taking out half the Mataura and the middle of the Mataura and thinking it could go the other way doesn't make sense when in the catchment scale. And I think we just have to be really careful where some of those discussions go because of synergies with the social skills. So one of the principles, the underlying principle that I think we also need to say is, does this make sense socially at the end? And those are going to be really hard decisions. But I think, I just think let's get the principles, work on those principles, and then look at the narrative, what it looks like.
Thank you. Just really by way of information, I've been talking to Southern peoples, partially about whether we want to try and make one Southern Otago Southland unitary, just because the strength and power of Otago Southland together would be not only significant in any discussions with government, but the governments would really like to hear a voice. If it was a single voice from Otago Southland, we would be extremely powerful, and it starts to balance out the voices that they're getting from the likes of Auckland or Christchurch. We would be, anyway, that was a thought. And when we've been talking to our friends down south, as Kevin and I did recently, one of the things that excited the Invercargill Mayor, Tom, was the thought that even without going together, because the thought has really been that we need to sort out Otago and Southland as separate issues before we look at any possibility of doing it together. We can do a whole lot, though, that isn't merging, like New Zealand does with Australia, to try and get things aligned so it's easy to do business on either sides of the Tasman, or those sorts of rules and things. And one of the things I raised with Tom in particular was doing more looking at both Otago and Southland together. For example, with science, if we looked at what science we think we need in Otago and Southland across everybody who's doing it at the moment, and then thinking where best could that be done. You know, here's the things we all need doing, here's the things only perhaps some of us need doing, but looking at that being done as a all of area sort of team approach for some of things like science, that would be much better than the replications that we might be doing. And I'm sure our people are talking to Southland, and in fact Environment Southland and things, about a variety of things. But if we sort of officially, for want of a better word, had a general togetherness look at something like science. And when I said that to Tom, his eyes lit up and he said, we could have a centre of excellence for science and we could have it here. And not only, things don't have to be here in Dunedin, they can be anywhere. And we could, for example, with science, we could have a team that work throughout Otago and Southland doing things that were in everybody's interest there. And it could be based in Southland, and that doesn't mean people aren't working all over Otago and Southland in science, but it just means that somebody's sort of got the team and we would all be part of it. And that sort of approach, one, in Otago, which is why I favour an Otago unitary, and with Otago and Southland together, I think we can start doing some of those things and really move forward, because we've started talking to each other about how we get together in more than just one little TA sort of silos and things. So I think it's pretty exciting what we can do in the future. And I think Southland is quite positive about where we could go to, and keeping things happening in the regions. It doesn't mean that we need to shift everything to the biggest place. It means we can keep doing the same things in the same areas, but do them more cohesively. So I think way forward's pretty exciting, really. And last but not least, Kevin.
I just wanted to add a couple of things on comments as we've come round. And if we go back to the original document that came out, was about simplifying local government. And I look at the minister's preamble, which I think sets the tone of what they're actually trying to do. And a couple of things. What they certainly said is the current system is inefficient, costs ratepayers time, money, and trust. So that's one thing that they are really trying to fix, the inefficiencies that the duplications of services that are creating. And it does say in there that not one size will fit all, that regions should design what works best for them. So that's open. Regional reorganisation plans that deliver service more efficiently and effectively and are long-term sustainable. So I just keep reflecting back to that as the aim. And we look at the principles that have come, and I look at them regularly, what comes from the Mayoral Forum, to ensure that that should be leading our thinking. The time, the more we talk to the ministers, is that this Head Start process is not delivering the final costings, the final vote from the community, the final plan. This is getting a plan, the concept of a plan that will best suit your region. And I'm just not saying Otago, I'm saying that this is what everyone's being told. So it doesn't have to be the final plan, but it is showing the intent that we are going to change the system that, to me, is actually broke. When you look at, and I have a couple of caveats around that, whatever is formed, the regional functions that a regional council does will be the foundations of that process. It's as simple as that. It needs to be. That will be the key. To that extent, government has taken the wrong step. In fact, they should have put us in charge of the whole reorganisation plan, because we are regional, but they haven't done that. So our functions will form the foundation of the new entity, but we don't need 6 of everything. You know, we've got cases where we've got quality biosecurity staff in a regional council, then we've got DOC doing stuff, and we've got TA doing exactly the same job. We've got catchment advisors that are doing exceptional jobs, yet MPI duplicated, and even in some cases the TAs are into that same space. So we don't need all that duplication. So somewhere along the line, we've actually got to take the bull by the horns and get that whittled down to deliver those functions efficiently, effectively, in a sustainable manner. Because we simply can't go ahead with Waitaki putting up their rate 17%, even these other rates are coming out now, whittled back to 6, 7, 8, 9%. It just actually can't go on. So we need to sit back at the core. Have we been given enough time? Probably not. But they are not expecting the final detail. And if more consultation needs to be done, I don't think that is off the cards. But we simply need to get into the process at the start so we can set our own destiny. 100% agree with Councillor Somerville. The key part that if we're in that Head Start process, we can start dictating the funding models, because we simply are not getting the right funding mechanisms from any government that's in power. Local government has been neglected for many years. So we need to change that whole basis around. And this is the start, but we will only do that if we have a strong collective voice from the region. So look, we should be excited. We should be taking this head on, but we should be willing to say to government at a certain stage, no, we will not be combining anything. You need to straighten out your funding models and give us the right support. So that's where I'm at the moment in my thinking.
Okay, I think I will now move that we note the report. As somebody, I think Gary's intending to second that. If anybody's got anything further to add at this point, knowing that this is, we can be pleased that Richard has brought back to us this paper to give us a chance to have a talk around the table, but it won't be the last and only talk. It's just the beginning of, or part of the process along the way. And we will try and, as far as possible, keep people informed about how things are going with the Mayoral Forum and wherever any more information we have coming to us. So if people have had their say at this point, then I'm going to put this motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Yes, that's for noting, which covers those five papers. We've got limited staff availability, but we can check if there are any sort of questions that are urgent and can't wait for a conversation. We've just got some stuff, just see conversation.
Okay, we're moving on to 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, which are matters for noting. And the proposal is to have questions by exception if you've got any urgent pressing questions that you didn't think to ask in the last week or whatever. Otherwise, we will move on to a motion to note these papers.
Quickly introduce them, maybe.
Are you saying take them all collectively or do them individually?
Collectively.
Collectively.
So you would like to introduce them collectively?
Yeah, well, I mean, consider them introduced. If we're going to, there's a lot of work in those papers, and but if time is so tight, then yeah, I'll find them, I guess, and
there is a lot of work in them, but they're brought to us so as we know what work's happening, not because a decision's being made about them.
We could get, sorry, as the profile lead with Gary, I don't want to cut across you, Gary, but so you don't have to go. Tom could maybe talk about some of the, just because we're in public, some of the opportunities that might come up in public to expand on them, and if councillors want to, come back to them in what form.
Happy to do that. So I think one of the papers that we had was an update on our monitoring and our scientific monitoring in the coastal space. We had a workshop on that recently that's available online. Most of the content that sits within the paper was covered and discussed within that workshop. So anyone who wants to get a bit of further depth there can do so by checking that out. We also intend to bring a presentation on the content of the
Indigenous biodiversity monitoring paper as well within the next 2 months. That'll come to our usual workshop round. Our usual presentation round will include slides and presentations from the staff that are responsible for those monitoring programs. And lastly, the paper on the Clutha Delta adaptation work talks to upcoming opportunities for consultation. And those are definitely worth noting. That process, that paper is just an update in that process, and will support. Has a bunch of content in there that supports the development of a conversation with our community around the future of the flood scheme in that area. But yeah, there's some dates and that sort of thing outlined there that help to inform people on when to and how to engage.
Right. I'm hearing that, Gary, you might like to move that the noting of those matters, and that maybe Gretchen would like to second that.
Correct. So
Lovely. Any debate? But, Kevin.
Yeah, Councillor Malcolm, yeah, just don't call me late for meals. Historically, we have had vigorous sessions led by the general managers and the leads of these projects at council. And I understand now that we are doing these as noting papers. What I don't want to do is, and I want to reinforce to the community that the importance of these works that we are doing. And I just want to be very careful that as a council, we are not giving them at some stage the appropriate public time, and giving them the community the understanding of the work that we're actually doing and why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve and the very good outcomes that we're getting. So happy to be part of the noting, but these are extremely important parts of work done for the whole of Otago and for our environment and for our people. So exceptionally good reports, and I thank the staff for the work and behind those reports, and not just the report writing, but the actual activities that we're doing. So they certainly are of extreme importance to us as an organisation, and we need to keep them front of mind to our public, that's the very good stuff that we're doing. Thank you.
Kate.
I appreciate we're just noting these. I've got two concerns, and I'll express them because we haven't had much chance to ask questions about them. Paragraph 61, scale and extent of wetlands. It's great that we've got more wetlands than we described before, but the methodology to get to that description really concerns me, and it's and whether it has been able to be on-site tested. What happens from these may be quite unintended consequences. It's great that substantial increase in known extent of wetlands compared to previous regional inventories, but what that might do in effect on the ground with rules at a later time does concern me, and I think we need to truth test this and take the community with us if that is what we're getting. And I think there's a piece that we're missing in that process. The other part is on the report on the Indigenous biodiversity. I can't yet see any reference to citizen science and stuff that people are doing out in that field, in that collection. It seems to be a piece of work that we are missing, where we've got catchment groups doing really good stuff. We've got eDNA being done by the community, not just by the council, and we're not referencing that, which I think again is an opportunity lost. It doesn't build trust, and I think we can be doing better, or at least reflecting what we're doing with the community, because we are doing amazing work out there in catchments, and yet it's not getting referenced in these reports. So with all respect, it's great stuff, and I sound negative. I don't want to sound negative, but we haven't had the chance to ask those questions to get that, and maybe my reading of the reports is wrong. But if we can do better on those counts, I think we will get a even better result for Otago.
These are noting papers, as we've noted, and I don't see any reason why the staff aren't noting the comments that are being made around the table. Would that be
Absolutely.
Gretchen,
Just wanted to, to talk about the benefits, I suppose, of the new structure, which is that everything comes to council. So these noting papers, in the past, they might come to a committee where you see facts, the technical stuff, and then you might refer it to the next stage, which would be council, to make a decision. If there was something that came up that was really important, highlighted there, you couldn't make a decision, but you might refer it to, oh gosh, there's some real massive hazard happening here that has to, or, I've just spotted something that really could be a massive concern to the Strathtyre community in a drought. We need to act on this. Or as councillors, as governance, gosh, that's good, but that lines up with my portfolio lead. In finance, I need to take this biodiversity learning and think about it in that context and then make a strategic decision as a governor. So now we need to make strategic decisions now when we get the information or refer it again. So it's not a matter for staff, it's a matter for ourselves to be changing our mindset and the way we look at this when it comes. Sorry, I know you're trying to be brief with these, but setting us up well for the future will mean that prior to this coming to council, we need to be thinking about all that and lifting our games as governors so that they don't just go, oh yeah, that's nice, and go back to the shelf. We've got an opportunity, so that's a little bit more effort from us probably.
you're about to have a right of reply or?
Yes.
Just before you do, Gretchen has raised an important issue for me, that changing our way of doing things requires a different response from us. And part of the reason why, of course, people have papers earlier where possible is so that if there are questions to be asked and things, or whatever needs to happen, and that includes for the noting papers, that can be circulated around people beforehand, and so that if we don't have to just note them, we can have other resolutions, but it does involve, as Gretchen has said, councillors engaging with these.
It's crucial for it to be transparent and in public too,
Yes.
when we're doing that, so yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Gary.
thank you. Look, it is a bit of a shame. There's a lot of work in these papers. They are ongoing work. We've got a very heavy agenda. I do get that we have moved to a different structure where the noting papers might get relegated a bit to the end, but they are an opportunity to interact with staff on the ongoing work. And maybe as leads, then as each of these appear for each of our sectors, then we may have to look to elevate them with our staff to ensure that they get the due diligence that they need. So, but otherwise, look, please fire in your questions and we'll answer them.
We'll put this resolution to note the reports. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Our resolution. Yeah.
We'll now close the public meeting. Do we don't move that first?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
To go to public excluded.
Yes, okay, sorry. We need to go into public excluded, so I'd like a mover and a seconder that the public be excluded from the following items on the agenda. Moved Gary, seconded Kate. All those in favour? On the contrary, carried.